I want to just say welcome back to my summertime series of conversations that I've decided to host, which I sort of am loosely describing as the lives we allow ourselves to lead. And in it, I'm talking to five different people who I think have really designed intentional lives for themselves, lives that looked very much more like the ones they wanted than the ones that they thought they should have. And in putting this out there as a summertime series of conversations, it's really kind of to inspire you. Maybe summertime's a great time to just loosen up your grip a little bit on what you think you're supposed to do and what you should do and allow your mind to wander to what's possible. So see these as little bits of inspiration for that. And I think today's conversation will really be a great one. I want to welcome you, Lisa Baird, to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a delight.
Yeah, and I think I'd love for you because one of the great things about people who've lived unique lives is that the introductions of them always feel somewhat inadequate. Like you don't feel like you cover all the juicy bits. So I'd love for you to maybe just give us an overview of your winding path. Not a big assignment to start us off with, but like a if you were hovering above it and looking down at this winding life that you've created for yourself, tell us some of the key points in that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I was a pretty good kid. I did what my parents expected me to do. I did what my teachers expected me to do. I wasn't, you know, valedictorian of my high school graduating class or anything, but I had a decent academic life. But I went off to college at a big public university in my state. And I double majored. I think that was the first act of doing whatever you want.
Mm.
um, my mom was always in the creative industries and had gotten a degree in social work, and she's an artist. And then my dad was like the MBA and the certified public accountant, and had always been in operations and finance. And so I double majored in journalism and finance because I felt drawn to both of them. And
Mm.
that I think was the first moment of just carving your own path, because then it sets you upon a trajectory towards something that is neither one nor the other. It's something in the middle. So I
Mm.
started falling in love with the idea of being a journalist in finance, maybe a reporter for the Wall Street Journal or something like that, which I never did do, but the combination of those two skill sets just kept on opening up different interesting things.
Mm.
I went away to New York, and was in investment banking for a while, which was a conscious choice on my part because I'm not naturally that great at math. And so I thought, well, let's go immerse. And I think that's another thing that you can do when you just want to carve your own path, is to choose the harder thing sometimes.
Mm. Interesting.
The harder thing, yeah, because I mean, how else are you going to learn it, unless you just face the music. So I did that with banking, and thank God, because I feel like I have a really good grasp on, compared to most people, I have a good grasp on macroeconomics and the role of interest rates and why the Fed matters and what happened in the '08 crisis. And I understand that stuff. I understand that language, and I don't
Mm.
feel bewildered by it, which maybe in a way has then given me the confidence to pursue even more unusual things, like stepping completely off of the finance treadmill that I was on career-wise when I discovered design and innovation, and just taking a complete U-turn during my MBA and entering into the field of design and innovation through this design company called IDEO in San Francisco, and getting an education in that. And I think I felt confident enough to do that because I had sort of conquered these dark corners by pursuing what was least comfortable. So I had a nice, long, fabulous experience in the Bay Area pursuing design and design innovation. And then because of that time spent doing that in the Bay, I was able to step out of the formal construct of a design agency and just go it alone. Before, it was cool to go it alone, before
Mm.
freelancing was the thing. So in
Mm.
2015, I became independent, and it was partially because I was having kids and didn't want to travel as a traveling consultant anymore.
Mm,
I still wanted to do the work. I just didn't want to be on airplanes. And so I just took a step off the treadmill of design but was still working in the industry, still being contracted by those same agencies and a bunch of other clients too. And before you know it, 7 years of that experience accumulated, which then ultimately gave me the credentials, I guess, and the confidence too, to apply for this visa to move my family to France. So I had to characterize my 7 years of independent consulting as a business. And when you do that, you have a certain visa available to you in France. You move your business to France, and yeah, you basically promise to create jobs for French people and grow your business in France. And so that's what I did. And I think all the steps that came before that sort of led up to that and
mm,
allowed that to happen. So I think it's really just a long series of saying yes to things.
mm. I love that. And one of the things that I talk about is like it's almost like building muscle and muscle memory, the capability within yourself to do things that might feel, as you described, hard or uncomfortable, but you've done them enough times that you kind of know you're going to be okay. Like when I think about that finding your unique way, to me there's that building up of capability to say, I don't know what's going to happen, but I trust myself enough to know that I'll probably be okay, whatever happens on the other side. It feels like, and with that, your life can, as yours has done, get ever more expansive, or at least ever more varied in sort of what you allow yourself to do. That feels like kind of the story that you're telling.
Yeah. Yeah, and to acknowledge there's a huge amount of privilege in all this. Like when I first went independent, I was able to do that because I was married to someone, am still married,
Mm,
but he had health insurance that
right.
cover our whole family. And there's a lot of freedoms you get through privileges like that. So I
Sure.
totally acknowledge the role of all of that. And if you take stock of what those boundaries are and what you can probably get away with and take those calculated risks, then yeah, you just have to step out and do it. And you do build up a practice over time of realizing that nothing is ever the end of the world. It's never the end of the world. It's actually the beginning of the world in some ways.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, this conversation is taking place against a backdrop of AI presenting a lot of people with the very real prospect of having to make some significant changes to the path that they're on. And for a lot of people, that does feel like the end of the world. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what the next step in my path would be.
Yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts about, like, if you were sitting across the table from somebody who was facing that
Yeah.
aspect of having to make the U-turn, to do the thing that maybe feels like such a stretch or even possibly unthinkable? Like, what would you say to them, if not as advice, just as your own reflection?
Well, the first thing that I think of sometimes in these situations is just pure statistics. Like you're not the only one, you know.
Right. Yeah,
There will be hundreds of thousands, millions of people experiencing this if this indeed is going to happen across society. So when that is the case, you can take comfort that there's got to be some kind of safety in numbers. Like there's a point at which it's not just an aberration and somebody falls through the cracks, that somebody being you. It's more like a fundamental workforce shift. And when it's
right,
as fundamental as that, there's likely going to be some other fundamental changes in society that will happen, and you won't be alone.
right. Great
There will
point.
be something that emerges, right? Because it can't not with this scale, with these numbers.
Right.
Um, but another thing to keep in mind, I think, and you know, it may be a day late and a dollar short, but it's just something to keep in mind because I think it's never too late to start spreading your eggs into multiple baskets.
Mm,
Never too late to have, several different ideas of what you can do. Um,
right.
and to try to avoid doubling down on any one thing. Uh,
Mm,
that has happened to me naturally because of I guess you could say, chronic curiosity. And because
I
I'm
love that.
overly curious, yeah, it's just, I can dabble in writing, and I can look and act like a banker when needed, and I can do a lot of other things in between, and that's because I'm interested in them. And so
Right.
being curious is a good inoculation against getting pigeonholed into something that might go away. So
Yeah.
those things are, nurture them, and also don't be afraid of vast, like, seemingly unimaginable change. I mean, I have an acquaintance who was a writer and an editor, in the, commercial writing, copywriting world for quite some time, and he's now a mail carrier in somewhere rural Colorado, because the bottom fell out of what he does, and he spent a year looking and ultimately decided, like, why keep on banging my head against this wall, and is now,
Yeah.
you know, enjoying his connection with the community. He knows people all around him now. They all know him. He's, like, one of the most well-known guys in town, and he gets to spend his time outdoors in a beautiful place. And, just having that perspective of, like, it might be really, really different, and that might not be permanent either. But
Right.
be open to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that kind of fluidity, that willingness to be receptive to what's coming and to not attach too much to it instantly, whether that's positive or negative, is so critical right now. One of my permissions is take it outside. So that for me was, the idea of what you're saying, that adult lives can get small, they can get fixed, they can get, this is who I am and this is where I live and this is, it will always be. And I think part of what's required and what's desirable right now is what you just said, the kind of willingness to go beyond, perhaps, whether that's geographic, whether that's your own sense of identity, your own sense of capability, to say, huh, maybe there is something more out there, and curiosity as well. I mean, you took your life way outside, from a geographic sense of where it started and maybe where you even expected it to be. What has been sort of what have been some of your observations or reflections of taking you and your family like very far away from where you were? What has that sort of shown you or taught you?
Yeah. Well, before we did it, again, there's always this calculus of, like, okay, what's the worst that could happen? And if the answer isn't that bad, then go for it.
Right.
Um, we found a program that really worked for us. That's the first thing. Like, I never would have done it if it was like one of these, oh, it's a 12-month nomad visa, and after that you have to figure it out. Like, no, I was pretty conservative in the way that we did it. It's like 4 years, and um, employment was figured out ahead of time for both myself and my husband. There was no, like, let's land in France and figure it out once we get there kind of thing. Um,
Mm.
but also, like, at the end of the day, even if none of that stuff worked out, we knew that the experience itself would be worth it. And giving the kids this opportunity to learn a new language. I mean, they're only 6 and 7 when we first landed, so it was a great moment for them to grab language learning by the horns, and they've done that. We've been here almost 3 years now, and I can almost kind of say that if nothing else good comes of this, that would be fine, because this one major thing, which is my kids becoming bilingual, is in the bag.
Right.
So just figuring out what would be the minimum version of success, and
Right.
realizing that you can do that it's attainable, and
Yeah.
on the other side of the coin, asking, well, what's the worst that could happen? And if it is not that bad, then proceed.
I love the minimal version of success. That's very good. And I love and appreciate the fact that, again, one of the things I'm talking about in the book is that we kind of have to loosen our attachment to predictable outcomes.
Mm.
We can't say, if I go there, then this will happen, and I will only go there if I know that will happen. I
Yeah.
think what is being required, and again, what's quite desirable, is if you take that little bit of a leap, as you've described, with all sorts of due diligence and with all sorts of, you know, understanding that you don't know what the outcome will be, but you're pretty sure that the experience itself will be worthwhile on some level that maybe you can't even see from where you're sitting, but you can trust that, it won't take from you. It'll give you something new that you can probably use as you navigate to the next space. And that's a very different mindset than if I think about when I was growing up. And I think even now with young people, one of my, I wouldn't say concerns, but one of the things that's on my mind is, are we preparing young people to kind of find their way in a world that isn't offering the same, assurances that maybe ours did? And do they have that a greater inclination to step into the unfamiliar or the uncertain in order to learn and grow? What if you've got young children, but as you think about sort of young people moving out into this world and look back sort of on yourself, what do you think are some of the key qualities or capabilities that are like, you know, little superpowers for you as you move into a world that for at least a decade is going to be very, very unsettled from a career perspective?
Yeah. It's an interesting combination of, again, curiosity and also ethics, I think. I think we're
Hmm.
entering into an era where taking stock of what you really believe in and stand for is probably
Mm,
going to be important, because there's a lot of things happening both politically and technologically that are standing on really shaky ethical ground. And we have to not just open up all these doorways to see what might lie on the other side, just out of sheer curiosity and out of this um, strategy of not putting all of your eggs in one basket. But as you do cross all of those thresholds, knowing that what you come upon might not be fundamentally right. It might be fundamentally wrong in some ways. And having
mm,
the tools to make those assessments, and so that you can narrow down um, what your true choices are, if you're limiting your choices to only those that you find contribute to your own sense of self-integrity and your own
mm,
sense of ethics. So
mm,
that includes the way that all of these new artificial intelligence tools and models are being built and deployed, and
mm,
what they are doing to underlying societal systems. Um, and the list goes on and on. There's climate change repercussions as well. And so just having an awareness for all of that so that you can choose wisely,
mm,
um, and feel good about what you're doing. Um, and I'd say that as you do that, and as you dabble in different things that meet this confluence of scratching the curiosity itch and also feeling good and right to you, don't just look at it and admire it, but actually experiment with it and do something with it and learn something from it, so that you truly are opening up a door, not just passing by an interesting looking door and peering inside.
mm,
Really try to open that door and have enough of a toehold in that space, because again, otherwise it isn't really serving as a potential pathway or potential trajectory for you as time rolls forward.
mm. I love that. You've got to open the door and not just kind of pass by it and think it looks interesting. The one of my permissions that always raises eyebrows is look for trouble. Um, but it's exactly what you're saying. I think, if I can think about my own coming of age, I was very much sort of pointed towards what I could call a sort of safe and corporate path. It was like, it was all about career building.
Yeah.
And I actually threw the spanner in the works by wanting to do something that had meaning. Like, I want to go to South Africa. I don't want to be a corporate lawyer. Like, what? Um, but actually getting to know that voice inside of me that cared about something, even though I couldn't really give a rationale for it. Like people were like, why do you care so much about global change or what's going on in South Africa? And I didn't I think we expect people to have sort of a rationale for what they want to do, especially at a very early age. Like it's got to make sense. And I think part of the challenge with caring about things, or, as I bluntly say in the book, like, what do you give a shit about? Is that it can always make sense, and it doesn't always promise to pay off from a monetary sense. And to me, giving young people at this point permission, as you say, to make choices that are ethically based, morally based, that speak to them. I mean, if there isn't a moment for that, we've really got to allow kids to come into this world feeling allowed to not just make money, but actually try and make a contribution.
Yeah, for sure. And there are times in my career where I chose the lower paying thing. In one case,
Mm,
I took a 40% pay cut because it was just so like necessary for me, for my soul. And
mm,
that's okay. That's totally okay. It's not like I had any trouble paying the rent. It was just, it was a lower salary, but it wasn't really a lower lifestyle. There's a
mm,
level at which you're satisfied and like figure out what that is for you so that you can free yourself from the chains of having to say yes to the next bigger paycheck and the next bigger paycheck. Because if you get on that treadmill, you'll probably never get off. So
mm.
just, figure out what works for you. Live a somewhat modest lifestyle, like, don't buy yachts. Um, because honestly,
Re-
prisons.
Relevant comment right now.
I know, right?
Mm,
Don't rent Venice for your wedding. Like it's a prison and there are appearances to keep up if you get into that game and it becomes, a bonfire of the vanities. And
yeah,
I would advise strongly against it. Like enjoy your life and eat at nice restaurants and travel and live in a place that you think is beautiful. Um, but figure out what's like the kind of minimum viable version of that
mm,
and go
mm,
with that. Because every penny you don't spend on all the other stuff is freedom in your career, is freedom in your life, freedom of movement, freedom of total discipline changes, like me from finance to design, freedom
mm.
of geographic changes from the US to France. I mean, we were able to, yeah, it's expensive to hire the lawyers that it took to get us here, but we had that money in the bank because we didn't have the next bigger house that we could have, or
Right.
we only had one car instead of two when we were living in California, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It afforded us the freedom to make the choices to live the
Yeah.
life we wanted to live.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk about travel light, and for me, you have just illustrated that perfectly. It's like optimizing for choice, optimizing for flexibility and adaptation, as opposed to optimizing for accumulation. And, I think for me, it's important to say that is not as much a values judgment as it is a reality check on, what we need, the space we need to be in right now when we are going to be asked to make changes, when we will want to make changes. And if we can't make them because of our car payment, um, that's a sad place to be. That's
Yeah,
not where you want to be right now. Maybe that worked 30 years ago, but right now, when you've got to be ready to be adaptive, and when, as you've described, you want to be, you actually want to drive that adaptation, all of a sudden, all that accumulation becomes a barrier to your choice.
yeah, absolutely. Like every, extra piece of infrastructure you pile onto your life is something that has to be dismantled if and when it's time to do something new. So, careful.
Mm. And with that, let me end by asking you about being a parent, because, one of the things that I hear from a lot of people, and there's my dog barking, one of the things I hear from a lot of people in midlife, and again, looking at people who are going to be required to make some significant changes who have kids, or women who have children who feel like protecting them, looking after them, and their way of life limits again their choice. And, they see that as sort of a barrier to them taking a risk. I can't make a change because, we've got the kids and we've got this and we've got that. So I think our ideas around security and how we provide security for ourselves and our family, often the story we attach to that keeps us from, making different choices. Whereas your story to me is like, the opposite of, hey, let's go. And by the way, you guys are gonna like it's gonna be so cool for you. Like talk about just, the how has, if being a parent has shifted your take on what's possible in terms of the life that you want for yourself and for your family.
Yeah. That is such a good question. I I think that for me, I always remember like, well, my kids generally don't know any better. You know, they know what we tell them. What they think is normal is what we've shown them is normal.
Mm.
And when we first moved here, the first year we were in France, my daughter, who was 7 at the time, was saying stuff like, and next we'll live in Brazil, and after that, Japan, because in Brazil, I'd love to have a pet toucan, and in Japan, I can't wait to get into all of the anime. And it's just like, well, no, we're not actually going to do this regularly.
This is a way of life.
Probably is maybe it for a really long time, maybe it forever. But it reminded me that she doesn't know that picking up and moving countries isn't normal, or that it's like such a
Right.
heavy lift. And so, with that in mind, I think that you define with your family what is normal for you
Mhm.
guys.
Yeah.
And that's what we've done. Like it's it's normal to be born and raised in Berkeley, California, and Oakland, California, and then ultimately wind up in France at the ages of 6 and 7. And now they've been at this school longer than they were ever at any other school. So, this is normal. It's just how we define it. And it's of course harder if you're trying to do that with teenagers, and ours were young enough to not have to require too much ripping away from friend infrastructures. But yeah, I think it's just down to how you define normal. You see this with military families. They're really tight knit because they have to be, because they
Mm.
move around so much. They are each other's community. So I think that's a key part of it too, is make sure that your family is the center of your community.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and I think just what you've said is a great place to end this in terms of permission to define normal for yourself. And I even say that in the book, there is no normal anymore. And hooray for that, because it means that we each get to decide what normal looks like, and to limit your choices based on a 20 or 30-year-old definition of normal that you never ever created or interrogated for yourself feels like such a waste. So I think it's great reminder that normal is what you make it. And I just want to thank you because I think you're such a great example of a very grounded, very practical, but still really rich and expansive life that you've created for yourself. And to me, a story like yours gives so much permission to other people to imagine what might be possible if you decided to write your definition of normal for yourself.
Thank you. That's very kind. Yep.
Yeah.
So much. We'll check back in a few years. Of
Okay. I'll look forward to that. I'm sure you'll have wonderful stories to tell. But thank you, Lisa. Thanks so much for your time.
course. Good luck. Bye.
Thanks.